All right, can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm going to speak for the next 25, 30 minutes about a topic called creativity and why it's important, even though we have a lot of technology and data. And this entire presentation is without any slides excepting this one. So there's no slides, there's no video, because I'm going to use the single most creative thing that you all have to tell this story, which is your imagination, which is your mind, right? So you're going to basically listen to me, and if it makes sense, it will make sense. If it doesn't, you can fall asleep. So it's relatively simple. So let me start with why technology and data are not enough. And today, we are at a conference obviously called Advertising Technology or AdTech, but while it's extremely important and necessary, it's not sufficient. I will basically begin with a couple of thoughts. One is I have an undergraduate degree in advanced mathematics, and I have an MBA in finance and marketing from a very quantitative school. So I am not, and I've also launched some of the first digital initiatives all over the world. So I'm not anti-technology, anti-math, anti-data, or anything of the sort. And I tend to understand it. But I'm going to begin with 3 reasons why it's not enough. So number 1 is this. Name me a single company recently, which isn't maybe a Google or Facebook or Amazon or TikTok and Alibaba, which are very few companies, that has actually differentiated itself using technology. I don't think it's differentiated itself using technology because, in effect, there's a big question, though we'll listen more, whether it's any more different than Apple. Apple having a better brand has basically almost caught up, okay? So what tends to basically happen is it's very, very hard to build a technology moat. Facebook has built a technology moat. Google has built a technology moat. Amazon has built a technology moat. Alibaba has built a technology moat. And those are technology and data moats. Almost no marketer has been able to do that. And why it's not surprising is because no marketer has enough information or enough data. Because they only know about their customer, and everything else they buy can be bought by anybody. That's number 1. Number 2 is most marketers, unless they're in the technology business, are not technologists. The entire capital structure of how you hire people, how you monetize is completely different. So that's one reason why, but I will go back in history and tell me, does your company today differentiate itself on use of electricity or the use of railroads? No. So there's a particular time and place where all these technologies become very, very interesting, and then they basically become, for most companies, commodities. And you cannot separate. So for instance, there's a gentleman called Scott Galloway at NYU who makes this particular premise. He says, name me one company in the world that has actually differentiated itself using Google or Facebook. Or is Google and Facebook nothing but a tax on all companies? You have to use Google or Facebook, otherwise you can't compete. But does a company actually win using Google or Facebook? But companies have used other media and have been very successful, like Nike with television and others. So the whole idea basically is to think that these things are enough to separate and build brands makes no sense. That's number 1. You have to use them, but you can never differentiate from that. So that's 1. The second reason, besides technology, history, and the fact that most of us don't have that, the second reason is this, which is you and I, women, men, are different than technology. So technology tends to basically be about zeros and ones, yeses and nos. Human beings tend to basically be, it depends on my mood. So I basically believe that one person in 2 different moods is more different than 2 people. I also believe that it's almost impossible to understand a person just by what they consume. So for instance, if you think about the Procter & Gamble company, amazing client of ours, huge company, very big, right? All of their products and services, what do? They have lots of products. But what's the common thing in all their products? They remove dirt. They remove dirt from your butt because it's toilet paper. They remove dirt from your teeth because it's toothpaste. They remove dirt from your clothes because it's Tide. Do you define yourself with your dirt removal habits? If I try to understand you quantitatively through your dirt removal habits, would I actually understand you? So the other focus is when you look very specifically with data, you do not understand people, as human beings and as citizens. You only understand them as consumers. But even more importantly from a human perspective is if we were all silicon-based, computing, data-driven digital objects, we are not. We are carbon-based, analog-feeling people. Because if we were the first one, we would basically buy, I'm giving you a sort of a US equivalent, I'm sure there's an equivalent here. We'd all buy Camrys, Toyota Camrys, because Toyota Camrys, dollar for dollar, is the best car in the world. We would basically live at relatively okay hotels, buy swatches. But why is it that the fastest growing categories in the world, for instance, in Europe, 3 of the 7 most powerful companies or market cap companies, all are luxury products, LMVH, Richemont, etc. Because people choose with their hearts and they use numbers to justify what they just did. Because if you choose everything for the number, you've already lost your job. AI is coming to take away your job. No brand was ever built on numerics. And we basically believe that data and technology is okay alone. It doesn't work that way. So that's the second reason. So one is you can't separate with technology and data because you don't have enough of it unless you're a few companies. The second is that's not the way humans actually select or the way humans work, which kind of is important. And an indicator of that is 7 of the largest 10 advertisers in the United States in out-of-home, billboards, hoardings, advertising are technology companies. And what do you think most direct-to-consumer brands are now doing, like Casper, Dollar Shave Club, Peloton? Television advertising. Right? So it's a very interesting thing that if you look at the technology companies, they're spending more money in non-technology platforms, which is pretty significant. The third area is this, which is where is the level of competition and what actually is creativity? So creativity was defined best by Steve Jobs. So he basically said creativity is connecting dots in new ways. Someone else basically said creativity is not copying. My basic belief is, creativity in many ways and innovation is fresh, insightful connections. So if you think about fresh, insightful connections, the most successful technology companies have not been built because of technology. They have been built because of a creative idea that they then use technology to code and write. Give you 2 examples. The first example basically is Google. So the insight that came through Google was Sergey Brin and Larry Page were studying for PhD papers. They were studying for a PhD. They never got a PhD at Stanford. And when they were studying the papers, they were basically looking at the bottom of each paper, and they saw citations. So as you study any science paper, you've got citations. They basically noticed that the same papers often got cited again and again. At that same stage, there was a search engine called Yahoo. There were many search engines, Alta Vista, etc. Those search engines, the way they organized things was basically using a librarian. So Yahoo was actually yet another hierarchical organizing something. Used a librarian methodology that you had like links to here's auto sites, here's whatever sites. What these guys did is they wrote a little algorithm. The algorithm basically said, can I point to a page where many pages are pointing? So if there's a page that's pointing to many pages are pointing to the same page, that probably is the page that people want to see. So they basically called that algorithm PageRank, and that gave birth to Google. That was basically an insight from watching PhD papers, looking at those links and saying, how do we actually write the code? If you think about fresh ideas, if you just look at technology, let's look at Apple. The first thing is when Apple basically came forth, people didn't take them seriously for 3 reasons. The first is, what does a computer company know about phones? In those days, it was Sony, Nokia, Ericsson, right? The second one is, how can you basically have a phone without any buttons? So BlackBerry was big with RIM. And this was basically not based on what the technology said, but what people wanted to do. Because people basically like using their fingers. Ideally, now you can see that they like using your voice. The other one is what gave birth to the iPad. So that was also a human insight. That human beings have 3 positions that we sit or stand. We sit, stand, and we do one thing else. So we sit when we work, computer. We stand and walk around when we communicate, phone. But we also slouch, lie down on a couch when we consume. So when we create, it's the computer. When we communicate, it's the phone. When we consume, it's the iPad. Human interaction creates technology. Companies creates creativity and creates data. Technology doesn't create technology, excepting for machine learning, which we'll talk about. Okay, it's kind of very, very interesting. So that's the second thing, which is, so one is technology cannot be a differentiator, data can't be a differentiator. Second is human beings don't believe that way. Third is the most successful technology and data companies actually are creative companies. After I speak, there will be many other amazing companies. You will find that some of them, TikTok, Spotify, Snapchat, differentiate themselves through creativity. So I believe that Spotify is much more basically about a creative company, about the next generation of music and podcasting and everything else. It's often been told, and this is sort of the joke, that Snap is Mark Zuckerberg's product development company. They come up with the ideas and then Mark Zuckerberg copies them, right? And TikTok, which has grown faster than anything else with 500 million people, they basically use the AI at the back, not in the front. In the front is this crazy creative stuff that we all get addicted to. So the next generation companies also come there. So that's one of the reasons why we basically point to the fact that the future is basically about data, technology, and creativity, and not just about data and technology. It's also not only about creativity without data and technology. So you have to combine those 3, which becomes extremely important. With that being said, I'm going to now speak about how one can use this in the future world, right? So this is the first thing I would talk to you about. So many of us, whether we work for a technology, data, business, or other company, work for something called brands, and we often work sometimes in marketing. I've worked in the world of marketing for 35 years. In fact, yesterday there's an article in Brand Equity that I wrote on how advertising has changed over the last 35 years. And I've actually lived through those. But if you look at what has happened over the years, I learned my first forms of marketing from Procter & Gamble, which are one of my opening clients. 2 years ago, I went to P&G's alumni conference, and I basically told them the following. Everything I learned about marketing from P&G no longer works. And that's the other form of creativity, which is what happens when the way you think about marketing doesn't work anymore. So I'll give you an idea. In the 80s and 90s, here is what worked for marketing. A, you focused a lot on something called the consumer. B, you spent a lot in advertising, so you basically got low rates. C, you used manufacturing and other sort of, so you basically spent a lot in communication, you spent a lot in brand building, you spent a lot on consumers, and you basically had resources. Today, focusing on consumers, doesn't make you understand people, as I basically said. You have to focus on people, because we actually have real power. We can speak back and we can interact. Most of the big marketing companies were built when consumers couldn't speak back, when consumers didn't have the internet, when consumers or people didn't have all these multiple things. So that's one. If you think about Dollar Shave Club, right? Dollar Shave Club, when it first came about, did it without television advertising. So the whole idea of basically focusing on consumers don't make sense. Brands are being built in completely new ways, like Dollar Shave Club was basically built through sampling, YouTube commercials, and fun, without using anything in traditional media, which is again very, very different. The third factor basically a lot of people believed in was scale. Now let me give you this interesting story about scale. The old scale, which still matters, is scale of manufacturing, because you'll get lower prices, scale of spending, because you might get lower prices, scale of distribution, so you can be all over the place, and scale of resources, so you can hire lots of people, etc. The fastest growing cosmetic brand in the world, which went from $0 of sales to almost $1 billion in 18 months, was created by a lady called Kylie Jenner. She's one of the Kardashian sisters. She did this, and that brand grew much faster than any brand that L'Oreal, P&G, or anybody else had. She did this with the following. Remember we said you need scale of manufacturing? She has no manufacturing. All her manufacturing is done by a company called Pure Beauty in California. Scale of distribution, she has no scale of distribution. Everything she does is e-commerce, is outsourced to Shopify, right? Scale of resources, her total company is 55 people. And scale of spending, she doesn't spend anything but uses 120 million Instagram followers. That's the new modern world of building brands, old scale and new scale. So old scale is scale of manufacturing, scale of spending, scale of distribution, and scale of resources. They still matter, but less and less. The new scale is scale of data, scale of networks, but most importantly, it's the scale of talent and the scale of ideas. And we are forgetting that talent and ideas are the differentiating advantages of companies. And we're forgetting that again and again and again. And companies suddenly get surprised. They call themselves quote unquote technology companies. WeWork. WeWork was never a technology company, right? It had no technology. It had beer. That's all it had. They gave you free beer. My whole stuff is, I can get free beer somewhere else. And you then have this mass hallucination that 6 weeks ago, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were trying to convince people, the retail investor, that this company was basically valued between $47 and $60 billion. It's now valued at $5 billion or less, 6 weeks later. And that's what's basically happening. People are basically saying, who can I trust? If I can't trust Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, because one day they tell me it's worth $47 billion and 6 weeks later it's worth $5 billion, what's going on? And trust can never be earned by a machine. It's only partly by sort of a machine. So that's the thing that we have to sort of recognize, is the way marketing is changing pretty dramatically. Why this is important is we're about to enter into something that is a little bit all around us, but we don't realize. So this is now where I will use my history. So we are now about to enter, we have entered what is called the third connected age. So the first connected age began in 1989. Internet was out long before that. Online, like Prodigy, AOL, were all before that. But 1989 is when Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web. And in 1989, from 1989 to 2007, all of us basically were connected in two ways. We were connected to information through things like search, and we were basically connected to transaction through things like Amazon. So the first era, 1989 to 2007, of which in the Western world, Amazon and Google dominated, in China, Alibaba and Baidu dominated, were basically connect to everybody, connect to commerce and connect to information. In 2007, we began the second connected age. In the second connected age, you had two things happening. The iPhone and smartphones, so we were now connected all the time, and social networks, we were now connected to everybody. That was the second connected age. In the Western world, Apple and Facebook dominated that particular era. And what basically happens is those four companies are four of the 7 or 8 most valuable companies in the world. We have now entered, a year and a half or 2 years ago, the third connected age. And so looking forward, in the way we are thinking about the future is we have to think about the third connected age and think about things we don't anticipate. So let me talk a little bit about the second connected age and things we did not anticipate. And they build on each other, so search will still be around, and mobile will still be around, and social will still be around, and commerce will still be around, so they aren't going anywhere. But let me show you the second order effects. Many of you came here using, Uber or Ola or Lyft or something, right? Those companies could not exist if there wasn't a second connected age. If you did not have mobile, and you did not have the ability to basically, or Airbnb, etc., if you couldn't get recommendations from other people, and if you didn't have your mobile phone, how do you operate those companies? Many of the new DTC brands would not have occurred without the credibility of social media and friends that I have used this product and I've used this service. So the real impact of technology happens in different ways. It's not just the companies like the Googles and Facebooks, etc., but it's the second order. But there's something much, much broader, and the real impact is what it is on society. So one of the key things I've been talking about is what began as operating systems for advertising. That's how most these companies were built on, Google and Facebook particularly, have now become operating systems for society. But they were actually optimized for advertising. They were never optimized for society. So as a result of that, you basically have the following things all over the world, but I will talk about the US, but I know it's true here, but I will talk about the US. 3 big issues. Number 1, polarization. Nobody talks to each other. Because if you can micro-target, you can get people all worked up about all kinds of stuff. It's one of the reasons why my good friend Trump got elected, right? Very simple. You suppress certain votes, you get people to come here, you say something, and boom, bong, there you are. Literally, he outspent everybody on Facebook. This is before Cambridge Analytica and everything else. So first is you basically have amazing polarization. Second is you have inequality. There's massive inequality. It's one of the reasons why 2 of the 4 people who are likely to be the Democratic nominee basically want to create wealth tax, Medicare for all, free education. Because if you were in the bottom 50% of the United States, your real wealth has not increased in the last 20 years. If you were in the top 10%, it's gone up 4-fold. The 7 richest people in the world have more money than the bottom 50% of the world. Part of that happens because of technology, because technology places a premium on superior ability. Instagram replaced Kodak. Instagram had 15 employees when it was bought, and Kodak lost thousands and thousands of jobs. This is one of the things that technology does, which people don't realize. It's affecting society, it's affecting culture, it's affecting politics. You see what WhatsApp can be very good here, but it can create riots, all kinds of stuff. Those are things that business, marketers, and others have to sort of recognize is where we're going. But there's another factor, which is the third one, besides polarization and inequality, is the single biggest thing that is at issue today, which is trust. We don't know who to trust anymore. You're sitting in the United States, and we have the President of the United States saying New York Times is fake news, right? All of you all can basically go to any search engine, any page on social media, type in the same thing, and you will get something completely different, absolutely optimized to you. It'll make you basically believe that you have the right answers because the whole world is all around you. That's what technology does. And that is one of the key amazing things we have to recognize, that we have now a global societal technology that was created by advertising. It was never created for society. It was created to engage people like a casino machine, which is pretty formidable. And the sound effects of that the side effects of that are particularly interesting. So that's one thing to think about. And now we're entering the third connected age, as I said, and everything's going to be on steroids. So let me tell you what that is. There are going to be 4 forms of connection. The first one is data connecting to data, which is machine learning. And machine learning is right now the biggest thing in AI. Okay, so if you think about it, when you select a movie on Netflix, 70% of the time you select a movie that Netflix tells you to select, because Netflix knows what you want better than you want, because they do basically simply people like you. 1/3 of all sales on Amazon comes from recommendation engines. So when you finish buying something on Amazon, they say books like this or someone like that, you click on that, 1/3 of their sales. Because they're basically saying people like you. That, by the way, is simple machine learning. It's been existing for a long time. You don't have to have like robots walking around. So that happens to be the first thing. The second one is things connecting to things, which is the Internet of Things. The third one is much faster ways of connecting, which is 5G. And the fourth one basically is new ways of connecting, of which voice is the first big way. And then it'll be AR and VR. Now you put just those 4 together, let me show you what's going to happen in India, which is going to be so significant that people won't know what hit them. Most people didn't know what hit them when Jio came around 3-4 years ago, right? And one of the key things that Jio did is it's basically made India the cheapest place to get broadband in the entire world. Now watch this. You've got 5G coming, which basically means, and you've got another big thing all over the world called cloud computing. What happens is when you have 5G and you've got cloud computing, you don't need a $1,000 iPhone anymore. You can have a $100 phone because all the computing is done somewhere else in real time. Because 5G is 100 times faster than LTE, 100 times faster with 0 latency. So can you imagine how industry, businesses, companies, creativity changes in such a particular world? Already you're beginning to see in the United States, 100 million homes have either the Google Home or the Amazon Echo, which is amazing. And that, by the way, combines all of these things. If you think about it, it's basically an Internet of a thing. It uses machine learning. It uses voice as an interface. And it'll get smaller and smaller and distributed all over. One of the reasons why Apple is in a renaissance is people aren't worrying that much about the Apple iPhone, because what Apple basically is they're going to become a fashion technology company. So the AirPods, right, are just the first of how they're going to take over your body. Because we're increasingly sort of seeing those things. You're going to have amazing computing objects all over the place. And the speed of that is going to be in the next 3 years, which is going to be pretty significant. So get ready for the third connected age and the creativity that will come and the business things that will come. I'm going to end with 3 lessons that I have learned in 35 years. I've learned more than 3, but these 3 are sort of shareable. So the first lesson I've learned is the future does not fit in the containers of the past. And most companies and most individuals are organized for yesterday or today and not for tomorrow. It's one of the reasons why incumbent companies often suffer. It's one of the reasons why middle management and senior management in companies get surprised. Because what they're doing is they're optimizing for the past. So L'Oreal and P&G doesn't see Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club just did 2 things. They listened to people and they realized that nobody wanted to pay so much money for a blade. But their biggest thing that they figured out is, why can't you just do a subscription business? So the creativity there was cheaper is actually fine because good enough is good enough. Do you need 5 blades, 7 blades, 9 blades? Who needs that? Right? In the US, when you buy blades, you basically have to, you're treated like a criminal. You have to go to get somebody to unlock the blade thing because it costs, a pack of 10 Gillette blades costs $40. Makes no sense, right? So they lost all thing of what people were all about because they just said, as a consumer, I want more blades. As a human being, it's the stupidest thing in the world. I don't want to be treated like a prisoner. I don't want a jail person. I don't want like $40, and I want it to come easily. So these are things that are extremely important. The future doesn't fit in the containers of the past. The second one that is extremely important is none of us know what the hell we're talking about, including myself. Okay? So I build a case for the exact opposite of what I think is true. So I can build a very strong case as to why Trump is the strongest president the United States has. Now, I don't agree with that completely because he doesn't like anybody that's our color, by the way, without a doubt, okay, among other things. But I can build a case, and only when I can build a case can I actually accept and understand why 40 million people in America, or 40% of America, don't care what he does. They will vote for him. Okay, they don't care. Nixon said, I am not a crook. What he's saying is, I'm a crook, so what? Right? But if you can't build a case, then you can't talk to the other person and you can't understand. And I built a lot of cases as to why everything I talk about is wrong, which is why I believe what I'm telling you is right, because I've actually built a case as to why it's wrong. And I've eventually said I got to make a choice. I think this is what it is. When you make a recommendation to management, when you are management and people make a recommendation to you, I would ask them to do one simple thing. Show me the case of why you're not right. And if that case is not strong, you've not actually thought about it. And in today's world, that's what we have to do. We have to build a case for the opposite, because the future also comes from the slime and not the heavens. It comes from places we do not expect. And we have, that is very important. The last and third thing which I will leave you with, I should sort of plug my book, but that's a different thing, is you and me have to recognize that we're living in a world, while we are human beings, we're living in a world where technology is progressing very fast. And the rate at which technology is progressing, you can basically see by the operating system number of, let's say, most brands. So Apple, right, is basically on the 10th iteration of operating systems for their phone in 10 years. So operating systems of technology are much faster than our own mental operating systems. And we aren't spending enough time upgrading our own mental operating systems. We're living in a 10.0 world thinking in a 2.0 mindset. And that is the struggle that companies, individuals, and talent basically have. And there's only one way to get out of that. And that is, you have to basically study 1 hour every day. So my recommendation to everybody is spend 1 hour a day learning new things. Now, if you don't have that 1 hour, then do 7 hours a week. But if you don't spend time educating and learning on a continuous basis, you are going to become irrelevant. And as someone who doesn't want to become irrelevant, and who also, by the way, hates change. So one of the key things when people tell you that change is good, I say change sucks. Right? Because if change is good, why is it that people always tell you to change? I say, I'm happy, you change. Right? But people always come to you and say, you change, you change, you change. I say, if it's so good, you change, I'm happy. But one of the things I've said is change is horrible because we don't know what we're doing. We have to learn new things. We're like riding a bicycle and falling. And so we have to keep learning. And while change sucks, irrelevance is even worse, and we don't want to become irrelevant, and therefore we want to upgrade our mental operating system. I'm going to end this with a 5-second plug, which is, it's still not available in book form, but it will be available before it comes out on Feb 20th. It's in India. It's available right now, just Audible, but I'm working with my publishers. So I've written basically a book about everything I've basically learned about how to do a whole bunches of things, like too much math, too little meaning, how to upgrade your mental operating system, and a bunch of other things. And I think the book version will be available soon, so you can pre-order it, but right now it's the Audible version. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rishad. I think